I do want to ask Don Calloway, a Democratic strategist, Gina Loudon, conservative commentator, what they are to make of this. And again, I'm hitting you both with this news about this travel ban that an appeals court has upheld in large part, confirming what others judges have said, that it goes too far. Gina, what do you make of that?
Well, I think this temporary travel ban is part of the reason why United States of America voters decided to vote for this president. So I think that the court is not doing the will of the American people, and I think that it's political, and I think that it's activist, and I really do hope it goes to the Supreme Court and wins there. But at this point, of course, it'll be less effective than it would have been if he could have done it right off the top.
Don, there's going to be a lot of second guessing over whether doing this for a second time and trying to take it to a court was the way to go, especially when the president himself had criticized his own Justice Department for watering down the original version, I guess, that he liked, with one that was more politically correct. I'm paraphrasing here. But does it even make it possible that it would go to the Supreme Court? What do you think?
It certainly does make it possible. I'm sure that the Office of the Solicitor General will file a writ of certiorari to see if it will be granted hearing by the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court, because of the hot political nature of the issue, is very likely to give it a very strong chance of being heard. But I think that the lower federal courts are right here. It's important to remember that the federal courts in this country are apolitical, and they're not swayed by the president's tweets or the politics of the day.
Well, I hope to think they're political, but some of them are quite political.
They're appointed by politicians, but their job is to look at the Constitution, and this travel ban is on its face unconstitutional and has been from the beginning, and that's why it's been struck down by multiple courts of multiple political stripes, by Bush appointees as well as Obama appointees to the lower courts, and I think it will face the same fate at the Supreme Court level. It was just poorly drafted, and if you want to ban all travel, you have to do so across the board without respect to national origin or religion.
All right, we should just say, and again, to update those watching, Gina, I will go to you here, but a U.S. appeals court has largely upheld a lower court ruling that essentially blocked the president's second travel ban. This is one that really affected travel between 6 largely Muslim nations. We didn't get the particulars on why they ruled as they did. This could set up a battle finally in the Supreme Court of the United States. But, Gina, it comes at a time when, of course, travel is going to be utmost on people's minds this summer. And a lot of them are going to be looking about where they're traveling to or from, right?
Well, that's exactly right, Neil. This affects a lot of things that people probably haven't thought about. And all due respect to my friend from Missouri, my hometown state, I want to say that, you know, this is something that was Obama's list. This is a temporary travel ban. The left would love to paint this as some sort of xenophobic or somehow bigoted idea. This is what the American people voted for. This is not a bigoted idea. This was based upon Obama's own most dangerous list, and you know, just pray to God another terror attack doesn't happen in the United States anytime soon, because these people we're going to be looking at them.
Neil, we do pray that another terror attack doesn't happen, and Dr. Loudon is correct that it is based upon a list of state sponsors of terror that President Obama put together. However, it's a poorly drafted executive order that does not reflect across-the-board constitutional way to protect our safety while restricting terror. I don't have much of a problem with it, other than the idea that it was poorly drafted and on its face pretty unconstitutional from a variety of perspectives, given that it violates the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th and 5th Amendments.
All right, by the way, as you surmised, Donna, Gina, you hinted at this as well. It is indeed going to go to the United States Supreme Court. Where that sorts out is anyone's guess here, whether it was a presidential overreach here. But, you know, Gina, one thing that's come up is that part of this initiative on the part of the president to restrict travel of the virtue of some groups is that what he said on the campaign trail got sort of, you know, mopped into this. Do you think that his strong comments that got in the way of what many interpreted to be a solid legal argument, but that justices don't forget campaign comments and blurred that here?
Those were comments as a private citizen, Neil. Certainly there were a lot of things that people like Obama and Hillary and even Bill Clinton said before they were elected as private citizens that were never considered in their official position as chief, as the president of the United States. And so I don't think that that should be considered, and I don't think that the politics should enter into this. This was about using the states, or the countries, I'm sorry, that Obama said were the most dangerous. This was a good starting point to protect our country from more bloodshed. I don't see how anyone could be opposed to that.
All right, we should explain here. The justices concluded that the president intended to discriminate against Muslims from the 6 countries he targeted in his executive order, and that this didn't change from their first view of the first ban up to the second ban. Now, obviously, Don, this goes to the Supreme Court, but it also comes at a time where we have an executive order that has been essentially shot down twice. 2 different executive orders on the same subject shot down twice, and obviously that means that the existing rules in effect, where we go through those from countries we deem dangerous, in other words, a holdover from the Obama administration, that doesn't change. Now, some had argued that was restrictive enough. Do you?
I think that the Obama rule was pretty restrictive, but I think it's also important to imagine how we get there and what informs the judge's rulings. I disagree with Dr. Loudon. It is important to examine the president's and his surrogates' campaign statements, because when looking at statutes determining whether they're constitutional or not, the Supreme Courts as well as the federal courts consider legislative history. And a normal statute has a series of hearings, and you have a bunch of notes and discussions that go into those hearings, testimony, and you don't have that here in the case of an executive order. So part of the legislative history and part of the executive intent is the series of statements that he makes going back to his time as a candidate and even the early time of his presidency.
Well, but that really shouldn't apply here, I mean,
it has to apply because we don't have enough time to judge his intent based upon the normal way that we would.
Well, the reason why I mentioned it is because part of this ruling includes the appeals court saying the president can go ahead and move forward with an internal study of vetting procedures, and I guess that, Gina, then raises the issue
that's what was so important. The fact that he made it temporary, if this were a quote-unquote Muslim ban, like the left would love for the American public to believe, but they don't, then it wouldn't have been temporary. This was so that we could get vetting procedures in place that were effective. I don't see how anyone could be opposed to that.
All right. Well, we shall see here, because it's a mixed read, especially when you read this part where they're essentially saying that, as the court is essentially saying, this appeals court, continue with your vetting procedures. It's about how you implement that we are drawing the line and leaving it to the Supreme Court of the United States to ultimately render judgment here.